Hey, I'm Dan, and let me tell you, life with Emily took a nosedive into chaos the moment she got hooked on that forever young project at GnTech Labs. At first, it was about the excitement of a breakthrough, a serum that promised not just to slow down aging but to practically rewind it. I was proud of her. Emily was brilliant, a top scientist on the verge of something big, but somewhere along the line, things started to get twisted. It wasn't just that she started looking younger, her skin glowing like she was perpetually kissed by the sun. No, it was more than that. Emily's eyes sparkled with a new intensity, her laugh louder, her every move filled with a wild energy I hadn't seen in years. She was buzzing on some high I couldn't quite grasp. Then, she started coming home later and later, always with some excuse. Her lab work, she said, was more demanding than ever. But then, there was the night I found her whispering on the phone, her voice low, secretive. When I asked her who it was, she just laughed it off, calling me paranoid. But something about the way she avoided my eyes, the way she hurriedly ended the call, it didn't sit right. A week later, I came home early from a business trip. The house was quiet, too quiet. I heard muffled voices coming from the living room. As I walked in, I saw Emily with a guy I'd never met before. He was younger, wearing a suit that screamed money, and had this smug grin on his face. They were too close, too comfortable. I felt a twist in my gut. Dan, Emily jumped up, a bit too quickly, her face flushed. This is Marco. He's one of the investors in the lab. Marco extended his hand, his smile too wide. Nice to meet you, Dan. Your wife is doing incredible work at GnTech. We're all very impressed. I shook his hand, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't just interested in her scientific talents. There was a tension in the room, a pull that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Yeah, thanks, I muttered, trying to play it cool. Emily's behavior changed after that. She became more distant, more secretive. Her phone was always locked, and she took calls in another room. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I checked her messages. What I found left me cold. There were late-night texts from Marco, suggestive, playful, and way too familiar. I confronted her. Who is he, Emily? And don't give me that investor crap. What's really going on? She hesitated, then sighed. Dan, it's complicated. Marco. He's not just an investor. He's got connections, power. He can make things happen for me, for us. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under, the excitement. The freedom. Freedom? I scoffed. Is that what you call this? Sneaking around, hiding things from me? Dan, you don't get it. She snapped back, her voice rising. This project, it's more than just a job. It's a chance to be part of something bigger, something that could change everything. And Marco. He's just helping me see that. Her words cut deep. I felt a cold rage build inside me. Helping you see what, Emily? How to destroy our marriage? She stared at me, eyes blazing, and for a moment I saw something new, a hunger, a desperation that chilled me. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe I'm just tired of feeling old, tired of feeling stuck. The room seemed to spin around me. This wasn't the Emily I knew, the woman I had married. I realized then that whatever this project was, it wasn't just changing her appearance. It was changing her soul. And Marco, he was at the center of it all. I knew I had to find out more. About him, about the serum, about what was really going on at GnTech. And I knew one thing for certain, Emily wasn't the only one at risk. If I didn't act fast, I might lose her forever, not to age, but to something much darker, something I could barely understand. But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I decided to start digging, to find out who Marco really was and what kind of hold he had on my wife. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would take me to the darkest corners of my own soul. The next few days felt like a blur. Emily's words kept ringing in my ears. Maybe I'm just tired of feeling old. Tired of feeling stuck. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was losing her to something I didn't understand, something dark and twisted. I decided to dig deeper, starting with Marco. I began by visiting GnTech Labs, pretending to be a concerned husband just checking in on his wife's work. But the minute I walked into that place, I knew something was off. The security was tight, too tight for a place supposedly just doing research. There were guards at every entrance, and I could feel their eyes on me, sizing me up, calculating. I was stopped at the reception by a woman who gave me a cold smile. "You must be Dan. Emily told us you might drop by. I'm afraid she's in a meeting right now, but you're welcome to wait." I sat in the lobby, pretending to be relaxed, but my mind was racing. I glanced around, noticing the lack of any real information about what they were working on. No posters, no awards, just a few abstract paintings and a single slogan on the wall: pushing boundaries, defining the future. It felt more like a cover-up than a mission statement. After what felt like hours, Emily appeared, her face a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Dan, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Just wanted to see where you've been spending all your time," I replied, trying to keep it casual. She forced a smile, but I could see the tension in her eyes. "I told you. It's all just work. Why don't you trust me?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "Because, Emily, you're hiding things. I saw the text from Marco. I know there's more going on here than just research." She froze for a moment, then sighed. "Dan, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Just go home. Please." But I wasn't ready to let it go. "Not until you tell me what's really happening here. What's Marco's deal? What is he really after?" Emily glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "It's not safe to talk here. Meet me at the diner tonight at 9. I'll explain everything." That night, I arrived at the diner early. I took a seat in a corner booth, my heart pounding. I had a feeling that whatever Emily was about to tell me would change everything. When she finally walked in, she looked exhausted, her face pale, her eyes darting around nervously. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking as she reached for the coffee the waitress had just poured. "Dan, you need to know something," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation around us. "Marco, he's not just an investor. He's part of something bigger, something dangerous." I leaned in closer, trying to catch every word. "Dangerous how?" Emily swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room again. "He's using GnTech as a front. The age reversal project is just the beginning. Marco is involved in illegal genetic modifications, human testing, things that could ruin lives. He's got connections with people, dangerous people. If you keep pushing, Dan, you're going to get hurt." A cold chill ran down my spine. "And you? What are you to him? Why is he so interested in you?" She hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. "Because I know too much. Because I helped develop the serum. I didn't know what it was at first, but now I'm stuck. If I leave, if I speak out, they'll come after me. And if you get involved, they'll come after you too." I felt a wave of anger and fear. "Emily, why didn't you tell me any of this sooner?" "Because I was scared, Dan," she snapped, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I didn't want you to see the things I've seen, to know the things I know." I reached across the table, grabbing her hands. "Emily, we're in this together. Whatever it is, we'll face it. But I need to know everything." She nodded, her grip tightening on my hands. "There's more, Dan. A lot more. But you have to promise me something. Promise me you won't go to the police. Marco has eyes everywhere. If he finds out I told you anything." I nodded, my mind racing. "All right. No police. But we need a plan. We can't just sit back and let him control us." Emily glanced around one last time before leaning in even closer, her voice barely a whisper. "There's one person who might help us. Someone on the inside who wants out. But it's risky. Really risky." I felt a surge of adrenaline. "We've got no choice, Emily. Tell me who." Her eyes locked onto mine, a mixture of fear and determination. "His name is Victor. He's been working with Marco for years, but he's tired of the lies, the manipulation. If we can get to him, he might just be our way out. I nodded, gripping her hands tighter. Then let's find Victor. Before it's too late. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. Emily's revelation about Marco's illegal activities had been a bombshell, and now we were looking for a man named Victor. Supposedly the only one who could help us get out of this mess. I wasn't sure if I could trust Emily, or even myself, anymore, but I knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back. I spent hours on the phone, making discreet inquiries, pulling in favors from old contacts, digging for any information I could find on Victor. Finally, I found a lead, a private investigator I knew from years ago who had dabbled in the darker corners of the city's underground. He owed me one. I set up a meeting. We met in a dimly lit bar at the edge of the city, a place where the walls held secrets, and the regulars knew better than to ask questions. The PI, Tony, was grizzled and rough around the edges, his eyes betraying years of hard living. He sat across from me, nursing a whiskey. Victor? Yeah, I know him, Tony said, keeping his voice low. Worked with Marco for a long time. Word is he's been looking to get out, but that's easier said than done. I leaned in, trying to keep my desperation in check. Can you get me to him? Tony chuckled darkly. Maybe. But it won't be easy. Marco's got eyes and ears everywhere. If Victor so much as breathes wrong, he'll be dead before he gets the chance to talk. I nodded, understanding the risk. I need this, Tony. Emily's in deep, and I've got to get her out. Victor's our only shot. Tony studied me for a long moment, then sighed. All right, Dan. I'll set it up. But if things go sideways, you're on your own. That night, I returned home to find Emily waiting for me. Her eyes were wide with fear and something else, maybe hope. Did you find him? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I have a lead, I replied. We're meeting him tomorrow night. But you need to be ready, Emily. If this goes wrong, we could both be in serious trouble. She nodded, biting her lip. I know, Dan. I'm ready. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to feel alive. Her words hit me hard. I knew there was still a part of her that longed for the thrill, the rush that came with the serum and everything it represented. But there was also a part of her that was terrified, desperate to escape. I had to believe that the part of her that wanted to come back to me was stronger. The next evening, we drove to a rundown warehouse in the industrial district, a place that looked like it had seen better days. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel Emily's anxiety radiating off her in waves. Tony had set up the meeting with Victor, and now all we could do was wait. Emily paced nervously beside me, glancing around as if expecting Marco's men to appear out of the shadows at any moment. After what felt like an eternity, a figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, lean man with a haunted look in his eyes. Victor. He approached us cautiously, his gaze darting around, checking for signs of a trap. You Dan? He asked, his voice a low rasp. I nodded. Yeah. Tony set this up. We need your help, Victor. He glanced at Emily, recognition flickering in his eyes. You're Marco's girl, aren't you? You're playing a dangerous game, both of you. Emily flinched at the words, but she held her ground. I know. But I want out. I didn't know how deep it went, how dangerous it was. You said you wanted to leave too. We can help each other. Victor shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. Marco doesn't let people walk away, sweetheart. Not without a price. What do you want, Victor? I cut in, trying to keep my voice steady. Money? Protection? Whatever it is, we can work something out. Just help us get out of this mess. Victor paused, considering my words. I want immunity, he finally said. I've got dirt on Marco, enough to put him away for a long time. But I need a guarantee I won't end up dead before I can use it. Emily nodded quickly. We can make that happen. We'll get you to someone who can protect you, but you have to tell us everything. Every name, every contact, every illegal experiment. Victor hesitated, then slowly nodded. All right. Meet me tomorrow night, same place. I'll bring the files. But if I see even a hint of a setup, I disappear, and you're on your own. With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Emily and me standing alone in the darkness. As we drove away, my mind raced with the possibilities. If Victor was telling the truth, we had a real chance to bring Marco down and save ourselves. But if this was a trap, we were walking right into our graves. Emily squeezed my hand, her fingers trembling. Dan, do you think we can really trust him? I glanced at her, my jaw tight. I don't know, Emily. But right now, he's our only hope. We drove on in silence, the city lights blurring in the distance. Tomorrow could be the end, or a new beginning. Only time would tell. After our meeting with Victor, the tension between Emily and me was palpable. We were now tangled in something far bigger than ourselves, caught in a web of deceit and danger that Marco had spun so intricately. The weight of our decisions hung heavily over us, and I could see the fear in Emily's eyes as we drove back home. That night, sleep was a distant dream. I lay awake, replaying Victor's words in my mind, questioning his motives. Could we really trust him, or was he just another player in Marco's game? Emily tossed and turned beside me, her breath shallow and quick. I could sense her unease, her guilt, and the lingering desire for the life Marco had promised her. By morning, we had a plan. We would meet Victor again, but this time we'd be prepared for anything. I arranged for Tony, the PI, to shadow us, to ensure there were no surprises. Emily reluctantly agreed to go along with the plan, though I could see the anxiety etched into her face. We returned to the warehouse at dusk, the shadows stretching long across the ground. The place felt even more desolate than before, and I could hear every creak and groan of the old structure echoing around us. I kept my hand close to my jacket pocket, where a small pistol lay hidden. I had never carried a gun in my life, but tonight, I wasn't taking any chances. Victor arrived just after we did, his face tense, his eyes darting around like a hunted animal. He moved quickly to our side, glancing around nervously. You weren't followed? He asked, his voice a low whisper. I shook my head. No. We're alone. Did you bring the files? Victor nodded, pulling a worn leather briefcase from under his coat. It's all here. Names, contacts, experiments, all the proof you need to put Marco away for good. But we need to move fast. Marco's getting suspicious. If he finds out I'm here, we're all dead. Emily reached for the briefcase, her hands trembling. Thank you, Victor. We'll make sure this gets into the right hands. Victor hesitated, his eyes flickering to Emily. Just remember, if you betray me, I'll make sure you pay. Marco's not the only one with connections. I could see Emily's fear, but she nodded firmly. We understand. We're in this together. As we turned to leave, a sudden noise cut through the air, a sharp crack. Like a gunshot. My heart leapt into my throat as I spun around, instinctively pulling Emily down with me. Victor fell to the ground, blood spreading across his chest, his eyes wide with shock. Sniper! Tony's voice crackled through the earpiece, panic evident. Get out of there! Now! Chaos erupted around us. I dragged Emily behind a stack of crates, my mind racing. Marco had found us. Somehow he knew. I cursed under my breath, adrenaline surging through me. Dan, we have to go! Emily screamed, her voice barely audible over the sound of more gunfire. But I wasn't ready to leave without those files. I crawled towards Victor's lifeless body, keeping low, my heart pounding in my ears. I grabbed the briefcase and turned back to Emily, who was crying, her hands clutched over her mouth. Run! I shouted, and we sprinted toward the exit, bullets whizzing past us. I could see Tony in the shadows, signaling for us to move. We burst out of the warehouse and jumped into the car, tires screeching as we sped away. For a moment, there was silence in the car, broken only by the sound of our heavy breathing. I glanced at Emily. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with terror. Dan, what are we going to do? I looked at the briefcase, now resting on the back seat, and knew that whatever was inside could either save us or destroy us completely. "We're going to take this to the authorities," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. "We're going to end this." But as we drove through the dark, deserted streets, a new thought crept into my mind. What if Victor had been playing us all along? What if the files were a trap, meant to lead us further into Marco's web? I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I had no choice but to trust what little hope we had left. We reached out to a contact at the local FBI office, someone who Tony had vouched for as clean, uncorrupt. We arranged a meetup at a safe location, a small motel outside the city limits, to hand over the briefcase. As we waited in the dimly lit motel room, Emily paced nervously. "What if this doesn't work, Dan? What if we're making a mistake?" I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet my gaze. "We don't have a choice, Emily. This is our only way out. We can't keep running forever." Just then, there was a knock on the door. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a tall, stern-looking man with a badge. "I'm Agent Roberts," he said, flashing his credentials. "You have something for me?" I handed him the briefcase, my hands shaking slightly. "This has everything you need to bring Marco down. But we need protection, for both of us." Roberts nodded. "You'll get it. But you need to come with me now, before Marco's people catch wind of this." Emily hesitated, glancing back at me. "Dan," I squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. "We're doing the right thing, Emily. Trust me." As we followed Roberts out to his car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. The night air felt thick, oppressive, as if the shadows themselves were closing in. I knew we were close to the end of this nightmare, but I couldn't help but wonder, were we walking into safety or a trap? The drive to the FBI safe house felt like an eternity. Emily sat next to me, her hands gripping the sides of the seat so tightly her knuckles were white. I could see the fear in her eyes, the doubt. We were running out of time, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on both of us. Agent Roberts drove silently, his face unreadable. I couldn't tell if he was the good guy in this twisted story or just another pawn in Marco's game. The briefcase sat on Emily's lap, its contents still a mystery. We were taking a leap of faith, one that could either save us or bury us deeper into this dark web of deception. Suddenly, Robert's phone buzzed. He answered with a curt nod and a few short words. "Understood. We'll proceed as planned." He glanced back at us through the rearview mirror. "Change of plans. We're not going to the safe house. There's been a breach." "A breach?" I echoed, my voice tight with anxiety. "What do you mean? Is Marco on to us?" Roberts didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered with a hint of something I couldn't read, fear, maybe, or suspicion. "We have reason to believe your location has been compromised. We're heading to a different location, somewhere more secure." I felt Emily's hand find mine, her fingers cold and trembling. I squeezed back, trying to offer comfort, but the knot in my stomach tightened. "Are you sure this isn't a setup?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Roberts glanced at me again in the mirror. "You're in this deep, Dan. There's no way out but through. Trust me, or don't, your choice." As we drove further away from the city, into the dark, empty countryside, my thoughts raced. Was this our last shot at freedom? Or were we being led to our doom? I had put everything on the line, not just for myself but for Emily, for the chance to rebuild something from the ashes of our shattered life. But at that moment, I wasn't sure of anything. We finally arrived at a remote cabin, isolated from any semblance of civilization. Roberts got out, scanning the surroundings. "We'll stay here until we get the all clear. Stay inside. Don't make any calls." He disappeared into the shadows, leaving Emily and me alone. The cabin was dark and cold, the wind howling outside like a warning. Emily looked at me, her face pale and drawn. "Dan, what if we made a mistake? What if? What if we can't trust him?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know, Emily. But we're in this now. We need to stay strong. We need to believe we're doing the right thing." But even as I spoke, I felt the doubts creep in. What if Victor had set us up? What if the files were fake, a ploy to trap us? What if Marco's reach extended even further than I'd feared? Emily moved closer to me, her voice a whisper. Dan, do you think we can ever go back to the way things were? I looked into her eyes, searching for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I don't know, Emily. I don't know if we can ever go back. But I do know that I still love you. I still want to fight for us. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I want that too. Dan. I want to make things right. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. I tensed, reaching for the small gun I had hidden in my jacket. The door creaked open, and Robert stepped back inside, his face grim. We've got company. Marco's men are closing in. We need to move now. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Where do we go? Roberts glanced at the briefcase in Emily's hands. There's a backup plan. A safe location in the mountains, but we need to leave immediately. Emily hesitated, clutching the briefcase tighter. What if this is another trap? I looked at Roberts, searching for any hint of deception in his eyes. We don't have much of a choice, he said, his voice steady. You either trust me, or you take your chances with Marco. I felt a wave of indecision. Trust a man we barely knew or take a leap into the unknown? The weight of Emily's betrayal still hung heavy, but so did the possibility of a future together, free from this nightmare. As I weighed my options, Roberts moved toward the door. Last chance, Dan? You coming or not? I turned to Emily, who was staring at me, her face a mix of fear and hope. She whispered, Dan, whatever you decide, I'll follow. I trust you. I had to make a choice. Walk away now and leave everything behind, or follow a path fraught with danger and uncertainty, with the woman I loved by my side. But whose loyalty I still questioned. I took a deep breath and stepped toward Roberts. All right, let's do this, I said, determination surging through me. But even as we moved to leave, I couldn't help but wonder, was I making the right choice? Was this truly the path to redemption, or a journey that would end in more betrayal and pain? And as we disappeared into the night, I realized that the answer would only reveal itself in time, if ever. The road was endless, the darkness around us thick and impenetrable. Emily sat beside me, her eyes searching mine for reassurance I wasn't sure I could give. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing, replaying every moment, every choice that had led us to this point. What had happened to us? How had we gone from a loving, normal couple to fugitives running from shadows? I tried to remember the first time I felt that distance between us, the first time Emily looked at me and I realized I didn't know her anymore. Was it my fault? Was it hers? Or were we both to blame? The briefcase sat in the back seat, heavy with its secrets. Somewhere in there lay the answer to what would happen next. Marco was coming for us, and we had nowhere left to hide. Roberts had promised to get us to safety, but could we really trust him? Or was he just another player in a game we barely understood? Emily reached out, her hand touching my arm. Dan, she whispered, I'm scared. What if we never find our way out of this? What if we're stuck in this nightmare forever? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. I don't know, Emily. I don't have the answers. I thought I did once. I thought I could fix us. But maybe some things are just too broken to fix. Her face fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. So, what do we do now? Do we just keep running? Or do we face whatever comes next? I think, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, I think we need to decide what we really want. Do we want to fight for this, for us? Or do we cut our losses and walk away? She was silent for a long moment, staring out into the darkness. I don't want to lose you, Dan, she finally whispered. But I don't know how to make this right. Maybe we can't, I replied, my voice soft. Maybe the only way forward is to let go. Or maybe we need to find a new way to fight, to build something stronger from what's left. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded slowly. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to try. I want to try to make things right, to be better. I felt a surge of emotion, anger, love, hope, and despair all tangled together. I want that too, Emily. But I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if I can trust you again. She squeezed my hand tighter, her voice trembling. Then help me, Dan. Help me find a way to earn back that trust. Tell me what to do. I shook my head, frustrated. I don't know, Emily. I wish I did. I wish I knew how to fix this, how to turn back time and undo all the mistakes. We drove on in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts, our own regrets. The road stretched out ahead of us, a metaphor for the uncertainty of our future. I didn't know if we were driving toward a new beginning or the end of everything. We reached a crossroads, literally and figuratively. The road split in two, one path leading back toward the city and the other leading further into the mountains. I stopped the car, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind racing. Emily turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. What now, Dan? I looked at her, at the woman I had loved for so many years, the woman who had betrayed me, but also the woman who was willing to fight for a second chance. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know which road to take. She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Maybe we ask for help. Maybe we ask others what they think. Maybe they can see something we can't. I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. Maybe. Or maybe we just make a choice and live with it. And with that, I turned to face the readers, to face you. What do you think? Should I forgive Emily and try to rebuild our lives together, or is it time to let go and walk away? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm listening. Help me decide. Because right now, I'm stuck between what was and what could be, and I need to know. What would you do?